There is an oil that costs under $2 per application. It does not sit on top of wood like paint. It does not peel, crack, or blister after a single winter. It soaks into the cellular structure of the timber itself and polymerizes from the inside out, creating a water-resistant, rot-resistant, insect-resistant barrier that moves with the wood through every freeze, every thaw, every summer, and every storm. Vikings used it to cross the North Atlantic. Scandinavian wooden buildings treated with it in the 17th century are still standing today. Finnish soldiers relied on it in the field during the Winter War. Captain Cook's Endeavour was coated with it before circumnavigating the globe. The global wood preservative market is currently worth approximately $2.5 billion a year, built almost entirely on synthetic chemical treatments that require reapplication, professional equipment, and products you have to keep buying forever. An oil that has waterproofed wood for over 1,000 years, costs almost nothing, comes from a tree, and has been quietly absent from mainstream hardware store shelves for the better part of a century. The economics made it disappear. Today, we bring it back. This is Mike's raw knowledge. The pine tree has been producing this substance for as long as pine forests have existed. It is not manufactured. It is not synthesized in a laboratory. It is drawn directly from pine wood through a process called destructive distillation, slow burning under controlled conditions that drives the resinous compounds out of the heartwood and collects them as a thick, dark, intensely aromatic oil. The Vikings knew exactly what they had. Every longship that crossed the North Atlantic vessels that survived open ocean voyages in conditions that would destroy modern recreational boats was treated with this oil inside and out. It penetrated the hull planks, filled every seam, waterproofed the structure from within, and protected against the biological fouling that would otherwise rot a wooden hull within a single season. Across Scandinavia, the same oil was painted onto wooden buildings, farmhouses, barns, and stave churches. Some of those structures treated with this oil every generation for hundreds of years are still standing today. Not preserved behind museum glass. Standing in the open air, enduring the same brutal Nordic winters they always have. By the 17th century, the demand for this oil had become so significant that Sweden's tar production was the country's third most valuable export commodity. The American colonies supplied it to British naval fleets from their vast pine forests. North Carolinians became known as Tar Heels because of how deeply this trade was embedded in their identity. Captain Cook's Endeavour. The ship that carried him on his first voyage of circumnavigation had a layer of tarred material applied to its hull specifically to protect the wood against tropical borer worms that had destroyed other vessels in those same waters. Finnish soldiers in the Winter War of 1939 mixed this oil with two other natural ingredients in equal parts over an open flame. The result was a paste that made their equipment completely waterproof in the most brutal winter conditions imaginable. No factory, no laboratory, 3 natural ingredients, and a fire. This was not folk remedy. This was field-proven technology relied upon by militaries, navies, and builders across 1,000 years of human history. Then the 1950s arrived. The petrochemical industry introduced synthetic wood preservatives, pressure-treated lumber impregnated with chemical compounds, synthetic sealants, branded waterproofing products, faster to manufacture, far more profitable to sell, and critically requiring regular reapplication and professional equipment to apply correctly. Pine tar costs almost nothing to produce. It comes from a tree. You cannot patent a tree. And what cannot be patented cannot build a recurring revenue stream. So it disappeared from mainstream shelves. Not overnight, not by decree. By the slow, invisible economics of a market that profits from complexity and has no interest in simplicity. What you are learning right now exists because Mike's raw knowledge exists. This channel is built on one principle, the knowledge that disappeared not because it stopped working, but because it stopped generating revenue. Water purification, wood restoration, paint repair, and today, the oil that waterproofed the ships that built the modern world. Subscribe so you never miss a vault opening. Here is what makes this oil chemically extraordinary. Pine tar is not a single compound. It is a complex mixture of organic materials produced during the pyrolysis of pine wood, including resin acids, phenanthrene derivatives, and a range of polycyclic aromatic compounds. When applied to wood, these compounds penetrate the cellular structure of the timber and bond to the lignin, and cellulose that make up the wood's fiber network. Unlike surface coatings that sit on top of the grain, this oil becomes part of the wood itself at the molecular level, filling the microscopic pores and channels that would otherwise allow water to enter. The water repellency comes from the hydrophobic nature of the resin compounds. Water molecules cannot bond to the treated surface because the resin has already occupied every available bonding site within the wood's outer cellular layers. Published research on natural wood preservatives has consistently shown that pine tar treated wood demonstrates significantly lower moisture absorption than untreated controls over extended exposure periods. The rot resistance comes from a different mechanism entirely. The phenolic compounds in pine tar are naturally biocidal, meaning they are chemically hostile to the fungi and bacteria that cause wood decay. The same compounds that give pine tar its distinctive smell are the ones that make the biological environment inside treated wood inhospitable to the organisms that would otherwise consume it. When you combine pine tar with natural turpentine, also distilled from pine resin, the viscosity drops enough that the mixture penetrates significantly deeper into the wood's structure before polymerizing. The turpentine acts as a carrier, pulling the tar compounds deep into the grain before evaporating and leaving the protective resin network behind. Add beeswax to the mixture, and you introduce a third layer of protection, a natural wax matrix that seals the surface against the physical abrasion of rain, foot traffic, and UV radiation, while remaining flexible enough to move with the wood through seasonal expansion and contraction without cracking. This three-component formula, pine tar, turpentine, and beeswax, is the same combination Finnish craftsmen and soldiers used for generations. It is the same principle that kept Viking longships seaworthy across decades of North Atlantic crossings. And it is the same chemistry that a $2.5 billion synthetic preservative industry replaced not with something better, but with something more profitable. The global wood preservative and waterproofing market was valued at approximately $2.5 billion in 2024 and is projected to keep growing year on year. The home exterior maintenance market, which includes deck sealing, fence treatment, and structural wood protection, adds billions more on top of that. All of it is built on the same foundational assumption, that protecting wood requires specialized, branded, proprietary products that need to be reapplied regularly and purchased through professional channels. You cannot patent pine tar. It has been produced from pine forests for over 1,000 years, and the process for making it is documented in historical records across a dozen countries. You cannot patent turpentine. It is distilled from pine resin and has been commercially available since before the Industrial Revolution. You cannot patent beeswax. None of these three ingredients has any intellectual property attached to them whatsoever. And here is exactly why that matters. When a company cannot patent the active ingredient in a product, it cannot generate licensing fees. It cannot create exclusive distribution. It cannot charge a premium justified by innovation. So the industry built its business model on something else entirely, the systematic replacement of unpatentable natural solutions with patentable synthetic alternatives that perform adequately but require constant repurchasing. The same pattern that played out in water filtration, in wood restoration, and in automotive paint repair played out identically in wood preservation. A natural solution with 1,000 years of proven performance was quietly displaced by a synthetic alternative with a profit margin, and the institutional memory of what came before faded one generation at a time until most homeowners today have never heard of the thing that kept Viking ships watertight in the North Atlantic. The products currently dominating hardware store shelves for wood waterproofing contain synthetic alkyd resins, petroleum distillates, and UV inhibitors, all of which break down under sustained outdoor exposure and require reapplication every 1 to 3 years. The industry's own application guides recommend this timeline not as a conservative safety margin, but as a minimum maintenance schedule. That is not a recommendation built around the product's limitations. That is a business model, a natural oil that penetrates wood at the cellular level and renews with each application has no place in a market that depends on the customer coming back every 18 months. Think about what you just heard. Viking shipbuilders in the 8th century understood wood preservation well enough to cross the North Atlantic and return. Scandinavian craftsmen in the 17th century treated their buildings with this oil, and those buildings are still standing 300 years later. Finnish soldiers in 1939 mixed 3 natural ingredients over a campfire and made their equipment waterproof in conditions that would destroy modern synthetic treatments. Captain Cook trusted it on the hull of the ship that changed the map of the world. This knowledge did not disappear because it failed. It was never disproved. It was never replaced by something genuinely superior. It was displaced by something more profitable, and the economic machinery of a $2.5 billion industry has been quietly counting on you never knowing the difference. The oil still exists. The trees it comes from still exist. The chemistry has not changed. What changed was the conversation, and the conversation changed because there was money in changing it. Now you know what the conversation left out. Subscribe, share this with someone whose deck or fence or wooden boat needs to hear it. The next vault opens soon.